second one. I think our second one is on a Sunday afternoon in February. So if you, I'm getting a lot of feedback from somebody. So if you all could mute, that would be great. And then when it comes times for you to talk, which will be soon, you can unmute yourself. But the Zoom people are the Zoom God who now runs the world. So we have to be very careful of the Zoom God because she is a fickle God, as all the technological gods are. And since the tech gods control us right now, there's really not much we can do other than say, please, please be kind. Anyway, let's go to work. I hope all of you got a chance. I know there was a couple of watch parties, and I hope all of you had the chance to watch this movie. I will tell you point blank that, again, after watching it again, probably for about the third or fourth time, every time I see it, I get something new out of it. And the older I get, the more I appreciate the movie. There's a lot of issues that I want to raise. I have a whole page of notes. But the last thing you need is a sermon, unless you really want one. Somebody, they're all shaking your head. No, that's not very nice. I mean, we always carry around a spare sermon. So let me open it up to you. You've all seen the movie. You all saw the questions, hopefully, that I raised. Free association. What was your reaction to this movie? And I want you to answer as the rabbi who's going to look at this film through the lens of Jewish values and Jewish traditions, not its cinema, not its Hollywood, not the acting. Okay, it's a Woody Allen movie. It has a lot of Woody Allen shtick in it, as usual, and that's okay. Whether you like Woody Allen or you don't, that's not for discussion. That's for another class. I want you to just respond to me as if you're looking at this as from a Jewish values perspective. What did anything bother you? Did anything just get to you? Go ahead. And I don't know if Ellen's running this.
If you want to raise hands, I see Bob Weston's hand is up.
Okay, Bob. Go ahead, Bob.
Moral is you should not cheat on your wife.
I can't hear you. What?
You should not cheat on your wife.
Okay, I mean that's a pretty obvious one.
Yeah.
But move on from that. What was there any moral lesson to be drawn from this film? And I think this film is a Yom Kippur sermon because of the various themes on Yom Kippur. So other than the commandment that thou shalt not commit adultery, what else? Anybody else?
Wendy has her hand up.
Go for it, Wendy.
And then Linda. Wendy, you have to unmute.
I know, it just wasn't.
Okay.
I think the amount of guilt that the dentist had was amazing.
Really? Why?
Because at the beginning, you wouldn't have expected him to have guilt when she was killed. But he did express remorse and guilt.
Was he more guilty for the adultery or the killing?
It seemed to be more of the killing, I think, than the adultery.
All right.
Linda Weinstein, did you have your hand up?
I think his conscience, and I thought it was really, I did. I unmuted.
Go ahead.
My tablet keeps freezing on me, so bear with me. His conscience, I mean, he kept thinking, going back to what his rabbi said when he was a child, God's eyes are watching you. And I think his conscience was really getting to him, the ophthalmologist.
Right, no, right,
more
right.
The killing, like they said, than the adultery.
So Dr. Rosenthal, it's very interesting. Dr. Rosenthal, who is the Martin Landau character, is an ophthalmologist. And what's one of the themes? What's one of the themes that's carried out through this entire film? Yeah.
The eyes,
The eyes, right. So
God's eyes.
God's eyes are the Father quotation. God's eyes are always on us, always. The lead character is an ophthalmologist. And what happens to the rabbi?
He goes
He
blind.
goes blind.
He goes blind. So right at the beginning, you're introduced, there's this theme. Now, what do you think that means? Was there symbolism in that?
Oh,
Linda?
Things are not always what you see. Think
are
they're-
the eyes the entryway to the soul? I don't know.
Allegedly, yes. I mean, you when you see eyes, you can see into the soul. Wendy, you had your hand up?
Yeah, he also, when she was dead and her eyes were staring and
Right.
he couldn't
right.
see anything in there.
I always tell students sometimes when I'm teaching like rabbinic students, we get into these conversations about, pastoral counseling and this, that, and the other thing. I said, here's one of the things I have learned, which they never taught us in seminary, and that is you're going to be dealing with people a lot, and they're going to out of their mouths are going to come a lot of stuff. And you don't know whether what's coming out of their mouth is true or false or manipulation or this, that, and the other thing. But this takes a little practice. I said, you want to try to get a sense of where a person is? Look at their eyes. And I said, I will tell students, I've had situations where people will walk in and they'll say, hi, how you doing? And they'll say, oh, I'm fine, Rabbi, I'm fine. And you look in their eyes and there's a sadness or there's a joy. And almost always, if you pick up on this and you are able to intuit this, you can make a judgment of somebody, say, okay, well, something, I hear what you're saying, but something, you kind of look like something else is going on. And you'd be amazed how many times that actually is true. I really do believe that the eyes, you can tell a lot about people. If you're, in certain situations, I mean, if you're running around at the Oneg and say, hi, how are you? Everybody's off, waiting, getting the M&Ms and waiting to go home. If you remember Onegs. But this symbolism of the eyes, and as Linda pointed out, and Wendy, the theme that the father always, when the doctor was a kid, the eyes of God are always on us. That's the quote. The eyes of God are always on us. That raises the theological question, because it's a very theologically based film on a variety of different levels. How many of you believe exactly what eventually almost got to the doctor, that the eyes of God are always on us, that God is always watching us? Anybody want to respond to that?
Ann Stone and Stone?
Well, I had something to say from before.
Go ahead. It doesn't matter.
I felt at the two things. I didn't feel that they gave the Seder the respect that it should have at the table.
Right.
They were very disrespectful. And the second was at the very end, when he tells Woody Allen of this great mystery, murder mystery that could be written. It's like he cleared his soul,
Right.
as far as he was concerned. He confessed.
He did confess.
And he left.
Yes,
And
he left.
And
Right.
that was, the end. It's like he had no more remorse. He already confessed to this crime, but just to Woody Allen, not to the.
Very good. Very good.
Linda Weinstein had a comment.
Oh, no, I don't.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Okay.
The gentleman Charlie Diamond?
Yeah, I was struck by the ending, the difference between how much guilt he was consumed with after the murder, and how much guilt he did not have at the end when somebody else was accused and convicted of the crime that he orchestrated. He had no guilt at the end, yet just after the murder, he was consumed with guilt and thinking that God was watching him. God knew what was going on, and God was going to punish him. But God didn't punish him. Neither did the state. He got off scot-free, and the movie ends. So that's what struck me, the starkness between those two components of the film.
Well, I want to hold that because you raised the theological question that's embedded in this movie, which is why I wanted to have you guys look at it. Anybody else have their hand up before we tackle? Okay.
Barbara Hood and then Felice.
Barbara and Felice, go ahead, Barbara.
It's just a comment, but I was struck by the fact that these two children were raised in a Jewish home, and yet neither one of them led a Jewish life. They were, yeah. And I think part of it was, I was trying to understand why, and I think part of it was what happened at the Passover table. That there were people there who believed in nihilism, that they really didn't have faith, and the children had a very ambiguous upbringing.
Well, that's you, but that Seder table is very reminiscent. Remember, it's a Woody Allen film who has his own mishigas with Judaism, but the argument between the father who believes God is there all the time, and the aunt who said, after the Holocaust, I can't deal with any of this. It's all superstition. And that's really that Seder table, that conversation really sums up a lot of post-Holocaust Jewish identity. You know, how could God, where was God at Auschwitz, and or vis-a-vis the Viktor Frankl, God was there, and it wasn't God, it was human beings who did this, it wasn't God. And so that was very indicative. And then you had the Martin Landau character standing over the table, you know, in fantasy, asking the question of, am I going to be punished? I did this horrible thing. Am I going to be punished? And then you juxtapose that with the conversation. It's very, very intense, very intense. Who's next?
Felice and then Marilyn Levinson.
Thank you. My part is not very deep yet because I'm taking all this in, and I really had a hard time with the whole movie. But to answer your question about believing that God has his eyes, yes, I discovered for myself that I really do believe that all the time, because not too long ago, I was in Publix and I didn't want to get the whole newspaper, but I was dying for the insert about the sales. I'm crazy about that sales book, and I started to take it. I took it out of the paper and I said, no, I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't take it. And so I put it back because God was watching, and I realized, yep, I'm convinced that God is watching me all the time, so I better be good.
Well, if it wasn't God, Felice, it was the closed circuit television, which for some people is equivalent to God because it's always watching. Marilyn, you're muted.
You have to unmute.
What I was thinking about in watching the thinking back on the Seder is that table and that communication was totally fit in that era when it happened. And there was, I thought, very little actual fondness or caring expressed among the people. It almost seemed to me that everybody was talking and nobody was listening.
Yes, it was a Seder table where everybody was there because they had to be there. I got the impression, not that they wanted to be there.
Anne's comments about lack of respect and lack of taking it seriously. It did seem like this is just get everybody together and we'll do what we have to do, yada, 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 amen, let's eat. And I'd like to think that a lot of us, we've improved on that some.
Well, we like to think that, and we have a little bit, and that does depend on the family too. But yes, the Seder table scene is really a classic type of a scene, very on all these very different levels. Any other question? Any other comments so far? Yeah, Ron.
The Seder table struck me as being sort of more of a power struggle and a display of family dysfunction than a religious observation or ritual. It's just pretty bad, I thought.
Well, I mean, if family dysfunction sometimes goes as a usual guest at a lot of Seder tables. So, and if you don't believe me, just read the book of Genesis, which is a textbook on family dysfunction. I mean, every single patriarchal family is totally dysfunctional.
And I think a lot of family get-togethers now in the past several months are going to be like that because of politics.
Well, there were, but the pandemic has changed a lot of the families because of Zoom. People are sometimes now so just anxious to be in touch with people that they care about or their friends or their family that a lot of times the other stuff disappears. And I actually know one of the Seders that I was last Passover, a friend of mine actually sent out in the invitation that they were going to host the Zoom Seder. And on the invitation, they said, we've agreed there will be no conversations about politics at the Seder table. I mean, just to tell everyone, because sometimes you have to do that in this day and age.
Good idea.
Anybody else want to make a comment before we move into the real tough stuff? Oh, okay, Wendy.
I thought it was very poignant when he went back to the house that he grew up in. This is prior to, I guess, the Seder scene.
Right.
Because I remember once my husband and I went back. We both grew up in Philadelphia, about 3 blocks away from each other. And we went back to the old neighborhood in West Philly, if you know where West Philly is.
I'm from Philadelphia. I know exactly where West Philly is.
I know. And right near Cobbs Creek Park.
Oh, yeah, Cobbs Creek Park. Yeah, they're closing the golf course.
And so there was no golf course when I was growing up. And I remember we wanted to go into the house. And at least I did. I wanted to go in. And you know how when you sort of think you remember stuff, but you're really not sure. And there was a little boy sitting on the stoop, and I was afraid to go up because I figured he would wonder, who are these white people coming into our neighborhood and trying to come into my house? So I never did take advantage of it. But
yeah, it's very interesting when you go back to, I've driven by places I lived as a kid, which were big, and you realize how small they were. And it's very weird. But him going back, Martin Landau going back to the house before the Seder scene, you know, it ties in with the voice of his father, with God is always watching you. And he did a variety of symbolic things, which one of them I caught last night that I didn't remember at all when I watched it yesterday. When Martin Landau goes to the apartment where Angelica Houston, you know, is lying dead after the guy kills her, and he goes into when he got home. When he got home, that's even more poignant. And he goes into the bedroom, he goes into the bathroom. And you remember what he does?
He washes
his hands. And I'm looking at this yesterday and I said, oh my God, I missed that. It's as if he just came back from his mistress, and it's like he's washing his hands, cleansing himself, trying to get rid of, I think Charlie alluded to trying to wash away the sin, wash away the guilt. Of course, the first 3 times I watched this, I totally missed that. And yesterday, I wrote it down, and someone says, "Oh my God, I missed that," but it's so obvious of the washing of the hands. It's these little subtleties in the film. Here's another question that I needed to ask you. This is why this instance, and Charlie raised this, that Dr. Rosenthal gets away with it. Okay. Where is this in our Bible? There's two very famous instances. Anybody want to remember? One of them you know, and the other one you may not have studied yet. What happens to Cain and Abel? What happens to Cain? Anybody remember?
The mark of Cain, he's marked for the rest of his life.
Yeah. What happens to Cain? He commits murder.
And he goes out in the world.
And he gets, and he prospers. His family prospers.
Well, we don't know that he prospered.
Oh no, it's in the book. Go. Don't believe me. Read the book.
Believe you.
Read the book. Go read the book. He gets away with it, and his children grow up to found cities and prosper.
Well, yeah.
He gets away with it. Second of all, how many of you remember this story? It was in the movie. I think it was in the movie of David and Bathsheba. I think this was a movie, and I think it was a 40s movie. David gets away with conspiracy to commit murder, just like Martin Landau's character. King David. This is the stuff they don't teach this in Sunday school. But if you go to the book, if you go to the Tanakh, if you go to the Bible, he's out walking. He sees Bathsheba taking a bath on the roof next to him. He says, "Wow," and sends his, who's this person? It's Bathsheba. She's married to one of your generals, Uriah the Hittite. King David goes over and says, "You know something? I want this woman. Bring me Uriah." Brings him Uriah, and he says, "You're such a good general that we're about to go attack the Philistines. I want you to lead the charge," which is code language for I want you to get killed. So Uriah leads the charge, gets killed. David, of course, pays a Shiva call on Bathsheba, who's not Jewish, but that's irrelevant to the story. Next thing you know, they're married. Now the prophet, Nathan the prophet, who's the court prophet, comes and rebukes David and said, "Eventually you're going to be punished. Eventually you're going to do it. But you got away with it. You're king. You can do what the hell you want. You got away with it." He gets away with conspiracy to commit murder. Cain gets away with killing his brother. It's fascinating. Exactly what happens in this movie. Because as Charlie pointed out, Dr. Rosenthal hires somebody, engages in conspiracy to commit murder. The murder is committed. He's overcome with remorse. But over the course of time, he lives a good life. And remember that right after he confesses to the Woody Allen character, he goes into the hallway, he meets his wife. And what's he say to his wife? "We're going to give our daughter a wedding even better than this." And they kiss and they caress. Exit stage left. And I mean, that raises the dialogue that really is at the heart of this movie. That's the question I want to pose to you. Because you have two competing messages in this film. One is the Dr. Rosenthal gets away with murder. And two is the conversation at the Seder table and the conversation that Woody Allen films with the professor. Whose theme is that love and that there's a moral conscience in the universe. So you have this competing dialogue, which is very, very religious. is there a moral core to the universe, or is the total universe totally and inexorably random? And what is it, boys and girls, kids? Annie?
He was very brokenhearted when the professor committed suicide.
Okay, why did he? And what's the meaning? Here's a guy who talks about love and the morality of the universe, and yet he kills himself.
Right.
What's the and I remember the first time second and third time I saw this movie, I'm saying, oh my God, that's horrible. If anybody should be, but he kills himself. Why? Well, I mean, that should bother us. Why? And even the Woody Allen character says he was doing great. He was out. He was teaching. Why would he commit suicide? Where's the morality in that? Where's the justice in that? This is a very. Go ahead.
Then Woody Allen is going to be, this project that he wanted is down the toilet because he can't do it.
Right.
Because he's dead. So,
right.
But I
And
don't
how
know.
does that relate to the woman that Woody Allen fell in love with, who is now going to engage to his brother-in-law, whom he hates?
Oh, so the Mia Farrow and Alan Alda thing. I think that's. Look, it's a movie that's in Hollywood, and it's a Woody Allen movie, so there's a high level of neuroses in it, and he plays the same. I mean, full disclosure, I'm a big Woody Allen movie fan. I think the best movie of the 1970s by far was Annie Hall, and one of the great movies of the 1980s was Hannah and Her Sisters, and he does. A lot of his stuff is beyond brilliant. I mean, his personal life may be in orbit, but his films are some of them are unbelievably powerful and very Jewish in a very New York neurotic way.
Barbara,
let me just finish answering Wendy. So Wendy, I think part of that is the Hollywoodization of the movie, sort of like to lighten it up a little bit with Mia Farrow and Alan Alda, and the juxtaposition of, if here's a guy who's just totally narcissistic, into himself, controls everybody, bosses everybody around, really doesn't care about anybody. And I never really focused on that. I think that's part of like the technique of the movie to just not sort of like lighten it up a little bit, and to inject that sort of like the Schleppedick love image. He sees it. He sees her at the wedding, and she's engaged now to Alan Alda, and and his marriage is breaking up, and you never have any finality of his character. His character is sort of like a loser, and he buys into that. So, and I may be totally wrong, but I never really focused. I mean, that was sort of like a diversion. That relationship was a diversion. I was really more focused on looking at them through the religious, the Jewish lens, the morality, randomness dichotomy. So who else had, Ellen, who out there hand up?
Barbara Hood had her hand up.
Where are you, Barbara? Oh, you moved over there. You were over there, and now you moved over there.
I just wanted to make a comment. After the professor kills himself, well, okay, the professor has a philosophy of life, but it didn't hold up. He kills himself. So there was a comment by Haley that no matter how complicated your philosophy of life, it always has a hole in it.
But yeah, that's true. That's true. So I want to go back to that question. And this is you, each one of you. Is there a moral structure to the universe, or is the universe random? Is there yeah, go ahead.
There was a saying many years ago. My mother used to say that man plans and God laughs.
It's a Yiddish expression, right?
Yiddish expression, correct. And I think almost in this case, when we watch the movie and we watch the film, we see man making these plans, but God has the last, even if it's the last impression on his soul, on what he does and how he manages his life. I think that's really important to know.
So are you saying that you come down on the more side of the universe is random rather than having a moral structure?
No, I think it's more of a moral structure than it is a random structure.
Okay.
I think that's how we function. It's like if something bad happens to you, the first thing you think of is, oh, I need to pray to God. Well, you need to pray to yourself. You need to figure it out yourself, and morally you need to work that out.
Okay. Anybody else want to tackle this question? It's not an easy question, but it's at the heart of the movie. And it really is, what do you believe? Forget the movie.
Mindy is there?
Unmute, Mindy.
Hi, am I unmuted?
Yes, you're fine.
Okay. I believe in the moral compass. I believe that, everyone knows what's wrong and what's right and the road they should follow, but not everybody does that. And I, unlike you, do not like Woody Allen movies
Sure.
because I think they're extremely strange. And
Oh, yeah, they are strange.
Very, very strange. And I noticed a lot of people seem to have dropped out of the movie when we were watching it, just for that reason, because I believe that because they didn't have the moral compass, that really bothered a lot of people. So I believe that we have the moral compass. At least I do. And I believe that most of the people on the call, or all the people on the call, also are following that mode. So
Mindy, does the universe have a moral compass? Not each one of us, because morals are in many ways very personal. Societies create them, but is there some sort of moral center to the entire universe? Or to rephrase it, is the universe created with some sense of morality to it?
I believe it is. Yeah,
okay.
I believe it is. I just don't believe everyone's following it.
Oh, well, that's
doing it.
Well, according to the news, you're right. But anybody else on this question? It's not an easy question, by the way, because it raises all kinds of issues. So Ellen, just calling.
Ron Hood has his hand up. Ron?
Yes. There seems to be a growing number of people who believe that we end up, after we live our current lives, that we may end up coming back once or several times to sort of learn how to live better or do better.
Okay, Ron, I'm going to have to put you on hold for a second. I may have an emergency coming through. Just hold on. I'll be back. I have.
That's concerning.
Well, y'all look good. Everybody looks very good.
I love the comments that Woody Allen had the little sidebar comments that he had to make about different things. I thought they were really funny. I'm not a real big Woody Allen fan, but he is quite brilliant in his movies.
Right. His style is consistent. I mean, you'll see the common pattern and style with all of his films.
We might want to mute ourselves.
He turned us off. He's fine.
He's muted. Rabbi's muted.
Yeah, he's okay.
He's muted, but can't he hear us?
I'm not. I think he's on his phone, and I think there he is. He'll let us know.
Sorry.
Oh.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm going to have to end at 8 o'clock to take care of this emergency. Where was moral compass. And Wendy, you were I think Wendy
we had Ron.
Ron was
finishing, then Wendy, then Charlie.
I was talking about the concept that people come back for additional lives, and they especially do that if they need to learn more about life or how to live a proper life, and sort of need more lessons or more opportunities or something. That kind of worries me. I'm not sure about how many times I might need to come back. But anyway, it just seems to be a lot of interest in that and some support for it apparently.
Yeah, well, there's parts of some Eastern religions who believe in reincarnation, and there is a strain of reincarnation in a way, even within some medieval rabbinic Judaism and mysticism, which we again rarely teach people about. But there's strands of everything within within the context of Judaism. If you look hard enough, you'll find a little bit of everything. Who's next?
Wendy and Charlie.
Just two things. You go to the question of why do bad things happen to good people,
right?
And the fact of nature and hurricanes and storms and like floods and cyclones, and who seems to get hurt more are the poor people out in the poor and the vulnerable, rather than the wealthy up in their high-rise apartments. So I would say no, there really is, it's just random.
Okay. And you're seeing a lot of that right now, Wendy, in the pandemic. I mean, it's not the people who have the wealth or the ability to have food on their table and a full refrigerator, even after a year of being locked down. That's why there's so many people all over the country lined up for food and struggling to not get evicted. And and that's part of this equation, because one could say, well, if there's a moral compass of the universe, if there's a moral action or energy that runs the universe, where is that? And of course, philosophically, you could then say, well, that moral compass is called God. And that's why this movie raises very fundamental religious questions about the nature of who we are and the nature of the universe and man's role in it. Very fundamental questions. Who we got next?
Charlie, then Marcia.
Charlie, then Marcia.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn. I'm thinking there must be a moral compass, because we kind of know what it is. I mean, there's some kind of universal acceptance of right and wrong. It might be very elementary and basic, but it's there. But at the same time, there seems to be a randomness to it. And, like, why do good things happen to bad people? So I don't know. I have to say that there is a moral compass underlying things, but it's not always, we don't always respond to it.
No, we don't. And a lot of people will say, Charlie, that that moral compass works in nature, not necessarily with human beings. And there's a midrash about the creation of the world, and it's a midrash from Midrash Rabbah from the beginning of Genesis, where there was a conversation in heaven between the angels, and God came to them and said, I'm paraphrasing, I'm going to create people. And some of the angels said, I don't think that's a really good idea, because these people are not going to mess around, and they're going to create war, and they're going to disobey. And why don't you just leave the world the way it is? And, you did a good job, and be done with it. And then another group of people say, no, because you got to create these people, because they will worship you. This is the egocentric God concept in this midrash. The only way you will be worshipped is how you have to create people who will then worship you, which is a theme all through the Torah. Because what happens in Torah and much of the Tanakh, if you violate worshiping God, what does God do to you? He kills you. He kills you. It's very simple. It's very simple. The Torah God is a very, very simple God. You do it my way or I kill you. It's very simple. There's no gray here. We don't teach this. We don't teach you this in Sunday school because it's scared the bejesus out of you. And we don't even bother a lot of times to teach it to adult. But if you do Torah study and you study the text, it's quite obvious. It's very, very obvious. Who's next? Ellen?
Marcia?
So,
Where's Marcia?
Rabbi, you talk about morale and art following life and life following art. And I was very creeped out when Woody Allen was spending time in a dark movie theater with a niece. Did that bother anybody?
Yes.
And then talking about how, oh, we'll go to a museum, being a public facility next.
Right.
But it just somehow, his relationship with that niece, it just didn't seem to, I kept wanting it to develop, and it didn't develop the way I wanted it to.
No, well, and in light of a lot of this stuff that's come out, when that movie, this is, I think the movie was 1989.
Yes.
And there's a lot of things have happened in his life and have come out between 1989 and 2021, whatever year this is. So yeah, Mindy, I know that's part of the issue. So it's a very difficult thing because you have to. Some people have trouble making the delineation between art and the person, as opposed to just looking at this as a film and what it represents. Which is why I wanted to keep this just to the Jewish themes of this, rather than all the other stuff, because that's a whole other conversation in itself. Yes, yeah, but that's a good call, Marcia. That's a very good call.
Barbara Hood had her hand up.
Go ahead.
Can unmute, Barbara. I just need you to unmute.
Oh, I was just agreeing that the relationship with Jenny, the little child, was problematic for me.
Especially with Woody Allen and him writing that.
Yeah, well, in the context of that film in 1989, obviously that's the niece and his sister and so, but let's.
Nevertheless.
Anybody did anybody else have their hand up there?
No, that was it.
Okay, Rona is a yellow hand up.
Yes, I do.
There you go.
Okay. Rabbi, I think that it's very interesting that nobody has really emphasized the act of adultery. No one has really mentioned this. Everyone has been talking about the murder, which of course was terrible. But I want to know what other people might be thinking about the adultery. I guess what bothered me so much about this movie, aside from the horror of the murder, is the fact that it seems that people don't frown upon having an affair. And I do. And I'm really upset by the fact that men seem to think it's just fine to have an affair while they're married.
Well, and let's see. Let me give it about 30 seconds to see how I answer this question. Well, that's why. I mean, right? Maybe before you logged on, I don't know whether it was Bob or the first person who spoke actually focused. It was Bob who focused in on the adultery. It may have been Rona before you logged on, but the very first thing Bob was talking about in the context of the film was exactly the fact that, you know, this guy was having an affair, and in essence, look, what do you expect? You know, this is, and that's right, because I remember I answered it was the commandment, the thou shalt not commit adultery commandment, which you get up right away. It's right there at the beginning of the film. And of course, you can then play around with the idea of the eyes. You're blind to this. I don't want to see this. Okay. I don't want to see this. I don't want to talk about it. I'm blind to this. To the instances of which gender now, you know, creates more adulterous relationships. The last time I talked to therapists who deal with this, they're telling me that it's pretty even right now. And that's
well, it takes two.
Well, no. Listen to me. Time out. And that's specifically because in the last 30 years, the change in women's role in the marketplace, the economy, as opposed to when many of us were younger and growing up, where there were more defined roles. The roles have switched. The roles have definitely switched in the last 20, 25, 30 years. Remember, this is a 30-some-year-old movie, so representative certain types of things then, which are very, very different now. There is, if you're going to ask me, is there a greater acceptance right now in certain things like this? I'm going to tell you, yes, there is. And I will tell you again, one of the family programs that we scheduled, the last one we're going to do, I think, in April, because we're doing one a month. The last one we're going to do in April on new rituals. One of the new rituals I'm going to share with you is a discussion around a redefinition of adultery in light of Alzheimer's and dementia, which is happening in Ahavat Chesed as we speak, because it's happening in every congregation. And it's a very, very different world. So hold that until April, but you're very, but you're very correct to focus in on it's and that his guilt, was the guilt because of the affair? Was it the guilt because this woman was going to expose him? And remember, it wasn't in the adultery. Remember, what comes out is the financial impropriety. And was he more concerned about the financial impropriety than he was the affair? I mean, that's part of that's a little subtlety that I remember the second time I saw this movie, I didn't focus on that. But remember what happens when she raises her voice in the apartment and says, "But I know about your finances." He says, "Don't you're wrong. You know, I just moved money around. I didn't do anything wrong." He got very defensive. So it's a very, I don't know. It's you raise a very good point.
Well, and along with that, if I may, when I was growing up, it seemed to me that Jewish people would never do such a thing. But now Jewish men are doing it too.
Rona, that was never the case.
Rona, you better sit down for this. I don't want to bust your bubble, but take it from me. Even in the 1950s or 40s or 30s or in the Bible times, this was not. That's why they wrote the commandment. They wouldn't have written a commandment 3,000 years ago, if you get my drift.
That's a good answer. Thank you.
But the difference also is when we were growing up, there was not the necessity to out everybody all the time. And there was no social media and this, that, and the other thing. There was a greater respect for privacy.
Yes.
That we have now, because the civility and privacy component of the society has really substantially changed since that movie has. Because remember, this movie was made before the internet and cell phones and Zoom and computers. Remember that. So it's a different. Just in the 30-some, 31, 32 years, it's a whole different world. A whole different world. Just take a look at your 8-year-old or 2-year-old grandchildren who are, you give a 2-year-old one of these, they say, "Thank." They know how to work it right from they come out of the womb with a phone already texting. Almost. Who else is next?
We have Mindy, then Felice, then Wendy, then Marilyn.
All right,
We'll start with Mindy.
It's Mindy. I guess one of my other thoughts about this movie was I came away looking at it thinking, how many of the 10 commandments did they try to, break during this movie? It just seemed to me like they were just ticking off the boxes on all the things that they could do, honoring the father and mother, the stealing, the adultery, just about everything they seemed to cover on that movie.
Well, in that sense, Mindy, things haven't changed. Just tune in the news or read the paper. Who's next, Ellen?
Louise had her hand up next.
Okay.
You have to unmute Felice.
Thank you. To reply to Rona, yes, it's horrible. And to a degree, he realized his guilt when he said, I was stupid, I was arrogant, I was vain, I just needed to be affirmed somehow. But he only got that self-critical when he was about to be outed. That's my comment. Thank you. And Jan also had her hand up, but nobody saw it.
Yeah, she's after, yeah, we go to
Okay.
Wendy,
Okay,
then
thank you.
Marilyn, then Jan.
So he was only guilty when he knew he was going to be caught.
Okay, so
But that's not unusual. That doesn't surprise you, does it?
No.
No. Okay.
They did have mobile phones in those days because they they were big.
You remember
But
that?
anyway,
Yeah, the big thing that Mia Farrow was carrying around at Central Park West, the big
yes,
kahuna
that
thing.
was a mobile phone. But I thought the relationship of the brothers was interesting.
Yeah, it was terrible.
Oh, which brother? Which brother?
Dr. Jack and Judah.
Right.
And Jack. That he helped his brother. So now the brother owed him, including that he should go and find a killer for the woman. But actually it was the brother that suggested it, that's how he would get rid of her. I don't think it occurred to Judah at the beginning that they would kill her.
That was an option. Yeah.
Well, he hesitated, remember? And then remember the phone call, he picked up the phone and said, I think we'll move on our arrangement.
Yeah.
Who's next, Ellen?
Now we have Marilyn.
All right. Okay. I was just going to say that it seemed that that the whole idea in that period was not that as much infidelity wasn't going on as it is now, is that there was more discretion and more privacy. And what he was upset about in the very beginning was simply that he got caught, that she threatened to tell, that everyone was going to know about it. I didn't think that he was that concerned about his infidelity, just that everybody else was going to find out about it.
Right, because he never had any intention of leaving his wife.
But
I mean, that was quite obvious. I mean, that the lifestyle that he had, he was not going to give it up. Period.
We have Jan.
All right, Jan, where are you?
Jan Sklar right there in green.
Oh, you keep moving in your box.
My point was caught up by Marilyn and Wendy. But prior to that, we were discussing infidelity. Well, what do we go way back to the beginning when there were plural marriages. So, a man didn't necessarily have to be, he just took another wife.
Right.
And added another woman into the harem,
Right.
So you took away that privilege or that acceptable position. So what do you have? You have infidelity.
Well, yes, you certainly, and once Judaism moved away from multiple marriages, which I think took place around the 9th century, the world changed. And of course, now when the whole marriage situation is radically different on every single level, there's all kinds of, there are all kinds of very different variations on the theme that are running around right now in our society. And it's interesting, but you are all correct. I mean, you're focusing on the idea that this doctor, he was concerned, he pushed the button when he knew he was going to get caught or exposed.
Yeah.
And if the Angelica Houston character would have said, this is fine, I have my life, you have your life, we have this lovely apartment, we meet at, we can continue to do this for years, no harm, no foul, I don't need anything more, you don't need anything more, there would be no movie. And that's not to say that doesn't happen. It may. Any other hands up?
Charlie had his hand up.
Because I want to give you one more question.
Charlie, no.
Yeah, I'm remembering his relationship with his mistress, Angelica Houston, and the dishonesty there. Even he questioned it himself, and that was a very subtext. I mean, there's so many subtexts in the movie.
Yes,
and
there
that
are.
was and that was one of them. His basically what you think is dishonesty with his mistress, but you're never really quite sure. But he even questioned his honesty and with his relationship with his mistress.
Right. Did anybody feel sorry for this guy? I mean, did anybody feel sympathy for Dr. Rosenthal?
No,
No.
no, no.
No.
I did. I felt sympathy for both him and the mistress. They both seem like emotionally damaged people.
Oh, the Angelica Houston character, definitely.
Yeah.
Very definitely. But and she's not really fully developed, but that's a whole thesis statement on her personality and neediness. Last question before I have to go take care of this other thing that just came up, and I apologize, but it's something for the congregation that really requires I have to jump on before it gets too late. I want to focus in on, of course, the rabbi. It was a great character. Sam, this is the DA from Law and Order. You know, all of the old Law and Order people are, you know, Lenny Briscoe is.
He's Jack.
The brother.
He's the brother.
Yeah. So the last scene in the movie at the wedding of the daughter, juxtaposed with the doctor confessing to Woody Allen, who's just seen the woman who he allegedly fell in love with, show up with the guy he hates, and they're engaged. So they're both, you know, one's going one way and one's going another. And then the scene immediately goes to the wedding, and this beautiful scene with the rabbi who's now blind, dancing with his daughter at the wedding. And then you have the voice of the professor as the over voice, as the coda to the movie, basically saying, the world is crazy. But people are defined by what they do. And the most important thing that we have is love. Anybody, how did you react to that closing? To me, to me personally, that was a beautiful piece of the way to end the movie. I mean, I actually used that quote in my book that I wrote a couple of years ago on aging. But anybody react to that and the concept of, you know, here the rabbi, who is symbolic of morality, is blind. He loses his sight. Okay. At the same time, the brother gets away. Rosenthal gets away with murder, and then the voice of the Holocaust scholar who commits suicide basically says, you know something, life is crazy. What really defines who we are is what we do, not what we say, but what we do. And in the end, the only thing that holds us together is love. Anybody react to that? And Mindy, you're giving me hand signals. I don't know whether you're telling me to steal third base or
See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil.
what do you mean?
Again, I think that this is a dichotomy, and I also thought the name Judah was interesting in the movie. I thought that they were just throwing out a whole bunch of symbols, but
Oh yeah, most definitely.
But yeah, him not having eyes, he couldn't see the bad things that were happening.
All right. And remember, in the dialogue in the office, the ophthalmologist always says, you always, always, you know, think that way. You always find the good in people. You're always looking for the good in people. You have this, and then he says, well, there's a moral compass that I live as, a moral compass in the universe. And that's, you have to, and you have to make, and he also says, I think, you have to make a conscious choice to believe that. Because if you don't make that conscious choice that there is some morality evident in the universe, what does he say? The result is chaos. He does say, he makes that juxtaposition. If you don't have that sense of a moral foundation, the result is chaos. Your life in the universe is chaos. Bob?
My father always said, the way you make your bed is the way you sleep.
Yeah. Listen. And I think that's, look, I think that's it's Deuteronomy 30:19. And the phrase of Uvacharta Chaim, you shall choose life. And the interpretations is basically what the coda of this movie said. You're not going to be judged by what you say. You're really going to be judged by the choices you make in your life and what you do. That's what really determines who you are. And we see this all the time. We see people say all lovely, lovely things, and the next day you realize that they're embezzling this, or they're doing that, or that's the legacy. That's the legacy.
Karen Beckelman had her hand up.
Yeah, that's what defines Judaism for me. It's what you do.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I don't think I really believe in God yet, but I consider myself a Jew because I do what I do.
Well, see, Karen, that's why I like this movie, because in essence, to me, it's a very, very Jewish movie. That's a very, very Jewish movie. Because at the end, after all the trauma and after all the moral questioning and all the actual real world, people get away with bad stuff sometimes. They really, really do. So you have to make a choice. You're going to go down that road and say nothing really matters and everything's a crapshoot. Or, yeah, that's part of the gamble of being alive. But I choose to hold on to the belief that in the end, most people are good, and that the most important thing is love. And the reality is, to paraphrase Abraham Joshua Heschel, the most important thing is love. Each one of us on this call, fundamentally, when you strip everything away, I will suggest to you that the most powerful drive each one of us have is not food, it's not shelter, it's not clothing. It's the fact that we want to love and we want to be loved. And I personally believe that 100 million %. That's why people will do anything in our power to be loved and to be needed and to need.
Rob, I have a question on the film though. How is this, I mean, we're all Jews and we're watching this as Jews. How is this film looked at by people who are not Jewish? Because there certainly wasn't anything good about Judaism in it.
That's true.
I think the film was looked at as a really good, 1980s film that raised moral questions and left people with a dichotomy of, good and bad and evil being rewarded and the challenge of what it means to be human. That's my recollection of how that. I don't remember reading lately reviews of it. I just didn't. And even when it came out, I remember watching. I remember going to the movies, if you remember those days, and actually seeing the film in a theater. And I looked at it because in I was running the region. And working at a little moonlighting at a little congregation, and I looked at it as a very rabbinic high holiday film.
Wow.
Even then, but that's part of our DNA. Okay.
But at the end, when you're talking about him getting away with murder, one of his goals was not to hurt his wife. And so if you want to go back to the love theme, he still loved his wife, and he didn't want her to find out about all these bad things because it would hurt her. So he pushed it all aside so that she could even be happy.
Ah,
Well, we're assuming that she's happy, but
very good, Wendy. I mean, you raised a very, very interesting. So, very interesting. Let me
well,
put
it,
it that way.
it sort of played off of what you said before.
No, it's just very. He did love his wife, you know, and you know he did, and he loved his family and his children and his lifestyle. And but Charlie reminds us, but in order to sanctify that, he's guilty of conspiracy to commit murder. So
who's perfect?
and the answer and the answer to that question is no one. That's
Well,
why
there
we
you
have
go.
that's why we have Yom Kippur. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to go to work, and I have to take care of this little thing that popped up. So
Thank you, Rabbi.
thank you. Next month, I
was
forget the
really
dates on
interesting.
Sunday. I think I forget,
I think
but we're going to look at a movie that's really allegedly for children, but it's not. Like most fairy tales, it's not has anything to do with kids. The Wizard of Oz, and when you watch it, which it's readily available all over the world and on TV enough, I want you to look at this movie from a Jewish perspective, from a theological Jewish perspective, and look at it that way, not from Judy Garland and Over the Rainbow, but I want you to look at it from what's Jewish about this movie, because I'm going to suggest to you that it's very Jewish, very Jewish.
Thank you,
Okay, be good, guys. I'm sorry I got to cut this off a little early, but I got to go take care of this.
Thank you,
Ellen. Thank you, Ellen, for
Thank
checking.
you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Bye, bye, guys.
Bye.
Can we hang around for a while?
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah, you